start with what do we need to achieve, what are the accident challenges that are the problem, and that was all set by Euro NCAP.
So tell us a little bit about the team members that we've got with us. They're all to do with the Euro NCAP standards, aren't they?
Yeah, most of them. So, I mean, I'll use the small child here, slightly awkward grab.
Hello, and welcome to Ingenuity, the podcast series from HORIBA MIRA, where we go behind the scenes of next generation vehicle development. In each episode, I'm joined by a new expert in their field, and we reveal some of the mastery behind the magic. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Ashley Patton. Hi, Ashley.
Hi, Sarah.
Now, Ashley, you're the chief engineer here for assisted driving and automated driving. Can you tell us a little bit, firstly, about how you got here, and then also a little bit about your role?
Absolutely. So, first of all, I've been at HORIBA MIRA now into my 13th year. So, for me, always growing up as a huge passion in automotive. So, anything that moves and propels people. And for me, I started out, first of all, with a huge sort of, passion in motorsports. My degree was in a motorsports degree, and then spent a number of years actually working in that industry. So first of all, kind of a lot of trackside and workshop with racing cars, and then moved to, as some people say, the dark side, into automotive development. So I started out then as after motorsport in a large Japanese OEM. And after a while there, an opportunity came up here at HORIBA MIRA, working as a chassis development engineer, working in the brakes department, working on a large program for delivery of a brakes attribute. So that was the choice then that was made. And as they say, the rest is history from a HORIBA MIRA perspective.
And tell us a little bit about your role here. So currently in your chief engineer role.
Sure. So I look after everything to do with assisted and automated driving. We've got a really, really broad capability in this area. So we have everything from Euro NCAP, which is a consumer rating. We have regulation. We also then have other services such as benchmarking. But my main role of all of that is the forward-looking aspect of what's coming tomorrow. How do we support industry, governments, consumer ratings on what's the next thing that we need to do? And how do we support to make sure that maybe the UK's got a position? And also there's a level of practicality and feasibility on how we do that. And that's the influence and support that we give. And with my role, that covers then how do we bring that back to the UK? How do we then implement those changes? So for the next maybe rating gear or regulation change, what equipment do we need? Such as maybe the dummies that I've got here next to me today.
I was just about to ask you about them. Yeah.
So some of the kind of maybe a bit odd props without faces. So how do we bring that, and how do we turn that into a test capability? The equipment, maybe some tracks that we need, skills, people, capacity, etc. So how do we turn all of that requirement from a market demand into actually how we deliver that for customers?
So tell us a little bit about the team members that we've got with us. They're all to do with the Euro NCAP standards, aren't they?
Yeah, most of them. So, I mean, I'll use the small child here with a slightly awkward grab. So all of the dummies, basically, with ADAS or assisted automated driving, what we're looking for here is essentially the vehicle now is looking outside the vehicle, and what we are constantly looking for is essentially a collision or a comfort basically position. So if now maybe you have a driver who may be a bit naughty and is using their phone and maybe isn't monitoring what's going on around them, there may actually be a developing collision. So let's say that was with a pedestrian in a town centre. The ADAS systems basically would recognise that the driver maybe isn't responding to that threat. And when you get kind of closer to that potential collision, what the vehicle would do, if it's a good system, is it would intervene and it would automatically potentially apply the brakes. That's one of the main functions that we would use. And obviously we can't do that with real people. Right, so
you wouldn't get the volunteers, would you?
Wouldn't get the volunteers, and slave labour is obviously not legal. So yes, yeah. What we do have instead is there are a series of worldwide standards that are developed with experts across the world in ISO. I've been working on one of those working groups as well for a number of years, and what we do basically is we need to create to the relevant sensors that we've got on the vehicle looking outside something that looks to the sensors like a real object. Now, this is a small baby. This actually isn't one of the standardized ones. We actually created this for further development and validation of a system in a much more highly automated vehicle. So this is when we're looking at the breadth. But typically the small child who is under my arm here, and also the child here, they're used, this one's used in regulation actually. And then there are others as well. So we have adults, we have slightly larger children, large cyclists, pedestrians, etc. But the main thing with these are small foam dummies, and they do look like the real thing to the sensor sets. And if you collide with them, it doesn't damage the vehicle, which is really important, doesn't hurt the test engineering side. And in some cases, maybe parts will come away to allow the rebuild to continue. So, yeah, some of the team.
Yes, you're working with them a lot, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Every day.
So if you'd like to
yes,
inspect one to see what you think, but essentially they're a foam target with a particular visual cover on them, and then inside a structure that typically maybe includes something like aluminium to show for radars that you would get a reflection on the wavelength that they're using. And then the size is typically appropriate for the object that you've got. And then maybe with a pedestrian, you've got moving legs, things like this, and that would give you the particular reflections that you'd see as if you were a real person walking.
So kind of how they're then recreating the real world environment.
Absolutely. So the main ISO standard is known as surrogate targets. And at the moment, that is continually growing. I always sit and ask the question of what would we need, and then what would we want to create a surrogate target for? So a great one is if we talk about objects maybe that have fallen in the road. So if you've got maybe a tyre that's delaminated off a truck, you've got a very, very large carcass, maybe the size of the table, that would be quite a safety threat on the road surface. So we would probably create a soft surrogate version of that. But if you've got a John Lewis truck going down the road and a pillow falls off the back, we're not going to create a surrogate pillow, you just use a pillow. So it's kind of that, again, going back to what do we need, and then what do we need to create a surrogate of it? And of course, for a person, we need to do surrogates of that.
And why have we chosen then to adapt those surrogates? As you said, not all of them are needed in regulation. Is that because it needs to be kind of more realistic, more real world environment testing? So
really we start with the most prominent collision scenarios.
Right.
So we could probably start looking at maybe Euro NCAP as the forefront really of leading the way in what collision avoidance technologies that we need in an assisted vehicle front. So the earliest implementations were actually to do with pedestrian and also from car to car. Now, the biggest ones really in terms of the accident statistics that came out of a German, which is known as GDAS. So for this, you've basically got crossing pedestrians. That was the very earliest implementation, but generally what the accident statistics would show is that it was adults crossing the road, either from the near side or from the far side, that would be the challenge. So over time, yes, there may be many more scenarios that may include smaller children, but really the start and the build-up of what's happened in Euro NCAP is a certain number of targets or dummies or surrogates, if we want to call them that. But over time, at the moment, I mean, if you actually look maybe at something as small as the child that you've got there on your knee, really this is probably at a point where at best they may be crawling. And if we look across the world, actually there is some work ongoing now on a smaller dummy about that size. And actually the accidents for this is where, unfortunately, what would happen is maybe a young child would follow the parent out onto the driveway. And because they're so small, unfortunately, the parents might not see them and maybe actually back over and there be a fatality from that back over. So at the moment, there is a lot of work going on the standardization to meet the dummy requirements for what we see as accidents. But unfortunately, there is accidents with young infants. So we are creating a dummy that will be standardized, and watch this space on what comes in the test scenarios for the future.
And that's really interesting, isn't it? That role, as you said, you sit on the ISO committees, that role that you play in terms of informing the future regulation and what it needs to look like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also what's really crucial as well. So from a UK perspective, we represent BSI, so British Standard Institute, and that really is kind of the UK front as an expert to support maybe a UK agenda. So for example, if we talk about maybe another object that we've been discussing for a number of years is actually animals. So if you were maybe for Sweden, representing Sweden, one of the biggest problems that they've got actually is moose that are impacted by vehicles. And because the body of a moose is really, really large and also very, very high, so it's got a very high center of gravity. If you impact a moose, what happens generally is the animal will come through the windscreen and into the car, and you get a fatality from that. Now in the UK, horses and large deer. So in terms of how we then input, the reason to have then the experts from all around the world is that regionally we are able to represent what is suitable as a regional option.
That's really interesting. Yeah. And as you say, that kind of global standard, then bringing all those different scenarios and what does that need to look like to benefit all of those community areas.
Absolutely.
That's really interesting. And I think I was going to ask you, obviously, the first time our paths kind of crossed here at HORIBA MIRA was when I was part of the People's Awards, judging the People's Awards.
Sure.
And we were chatting before that you were obviously in the innovation category. And I think what you'd done in terms of ADAS and creating that kind of platform for testing for ADAS, not just for HORIBA MIRA, but for the whole of the UK, obviously was what kind of really jumped out, and you got a special recognition award, which, as you said, is still on the wall because no one received any special recognition. This was last year, and no one received a special recognition this year. Obviously, that must be a career highlight, I'm guessing. But also, tell us a little bit about that role that you've played in terms of, raising the profile of the UK as a whole in this market.
Yeah, so I think what's really important to start with actually is this is quite a long journey towards that success measure, which was fantastic, of course, to be recognised. And like you say, it's great every time we're going for a coffee that my name and also the team's name as well is also there with me on special recognition. But really, I mean, this is a journey that we look back probably more than 10 years ago in HORIBA MIRA. So even as early as before Euro NCAP had car-to-car, car-to-pedestrian in their rating in 2016, we were already monitoring and working with what was going on in the conferences in Euro NCAP. So I was already attending and working with the special, directions of what was going on in terms of the future for Euro NCAP from their technical manager to do with ADAS. And this is back in 2013. We then started to monitor really what was happening in the regulatory side and also then with the growth of Euro NCAP, not just looking at crash protection. So when you've had a crash, how do you protect the occupants and also the people that are outside, maybe if you impact a pedestrian, but also then how do you prevent the collision in the first place? So this collision or crash avoidance type activities, sometimes also known as active safety. So we're monitoring what was going on, and one of the actually landmark things that happened really was 15th of November 2015, the implementation of a new UNEC regulation. And that actually was on heavy goods vehicles first. So that mandated that you're required to have AEB under Regulation 131. And within that, there was some, probably what we call now some pretty Heath Robinson tools in the day. You used to have a kind of a half target that you towed with a kind of rail system. And that really was one of the starts of the reason why ADAS looks like it's going to be then starting to be taken up more. And then we saw, the work that's happening with Euro NCAP and the implementation then of, collisions with other cars, but also then they included pedestrians. And then every 2 years, Euro NCAP will continue to update the rating. Now it's changed a bit. So originally we were going to have an update in every 2 years, but then with COVID, actually that delayed it a year. And also now the ratings are becoming incredibly complex and also rather large. So now actually it's a 3-year cycle actually from now. So the latest implementation was 23, the next is 26. So when we look really at HORIBA MIRA's journey in that, we really started in really starting to offer for UK PLC how we put, the UK on the map as an excellence of location for assisted and automated driving validation verification. And that journey really started for us at the end of 2016, and I was involved in that, I'm proud to say. And really, I think when we look at the special recognition side of it, a lot of it is seeing the vision of what we needed to achieve and just going for exactly that vision. Along the way, the path is not always in an upward trajectory, let's say. But what you've got to do, you've got to learn from mistakes and still the North Star goal and continue to go for that. And for us, we we set a internal team focus of to be the best, the world's best assisted automated test service in the world. And probably I would say around the time that maybe the special recognition time was happening, I'd say that there was enough indicators for us to be really confident that we're on the world stage up there with the best.
Yeah, definitely. And as you said, a great job for UK PLC as well in that too.
Absolutely so.
And so you've mentioned heavy goods vehicles and that being kind of the first place really that assisted driving systems kind of came into regulation. Yep. Tell us a little bit more about Euro NCAP's journey in that sense, because they've obviously started with passenger cars but have moved into vans and trucks now as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, so absolutely, like you say there, so the end of 2015, let's just say it's 2016 or so, yeah, regulation had a couple of regulations. It was a bit of AEB and some lane departure warning for heavy trucks, but yeah, Euro NCAP focused on passenger cars because that was generally their main focus overall and within Vision Zero, essentially. And a lot of the accident statistics, obviously were around significant numbers in passenger car accidents. Now, what's really interesting over time is regulation has continued to add with the update of the General Safety Regulation 2 to give a real baseline of new standards. So for heavy goods vehicles, there's things like tyre pressure monitoring systems, there's moving off information. So essentially that's if you've got something in front of you maybe you can't see so well because of the topography of the cab and you've got blind spots, it's a warning system that helps you to see, if you've got anything that's down there. Then also if you're turning as well, blind spot information systems. And there's other regulations like this as well. But for Euro NCAP, yes, they've focused very, very heavily over the years since that 2016 on active safety on adding more and more. But also a few years ago, the commercial vehicle side, Euro NCAP vans was launched. And Euro NCAP vans, again, what was really interesting was they were looking at essentially one OEM. So if you look at a OEM passenger vehicle, it's a 5-star car. You look at you look at the van in the same brand with the 5-star car, and if you did a study on it and how many stars you think it would achieve, what do you reckon?
I don't know. I guess you'd like to think it shares the technology in the same brand, but I imagine you're going to tell me it doesn't.
Exactly.
Yeah, maybe
it was
4,
no,
3 or a 4.
No, no, not at all. It's 0.
Really?
Absolutely nothing at all. So other than what was mandated and really for vans at that point, there wasn't anything. So on one hand, coming out of whether it's different factories, whatever, but either way, one badge, the front of a van and the front of a car, 5-star car, 0-star van. Euro NCAP said that needs to change.
Yeah.
And even more so, actually, when you start looking at vans, generally they run heavier on the roads than passenger cars. So if they're actually involved in an accident anyway, then generally the consequences are worse. So certainly if you picture a heavily laden van towards a car, then you're going to have some issues, but just because of the physical energy that you've got, right? And then when we start looking again at the continuation of commercial vehicles, heavy trucks, there's nothing in the world up to now that has done anything above regulation, which only really just increased anyway above this AEB and lane departure warning. So general safety regulation's only been a couple of years really. And Euro NCAP said, okay, well, let's do something also on trucks because they're massively overrepresented in fatalities on RTAs. So you've got 5% of road traffic accidents in Europe. So 5% involve a HGV, 15% fatality based. So, and generally, even more so, when you start looking at the statistics of that, the people driving the truck, generally pretty safe. Usually, the ones that come off worse than the fatality are the collision partner. So whether that's a car, a pedestrian, a cyclist, a motorcyclist, those are the fatalities. Now, this actually, if you look at that, that means that to make a big impact, to start with, we need to be proactive on active safety systems. So this was a perfect synergy for Euro NCAP to start looking and saying, right, we've got technology that's out of the passenger car world now, from everything we've been developing with suppliers and OEMs for active safety systems. We've got trucks that are overrepresented, and it's always the collision partner. So what we need to do is maybe reduce the potential of those collisions. So how do we do that? So safe driving, collision avoidance. And this is exactly the perfect synergy where active safety systems come in. And so Euro NCAP truck rating was born.
Fantastic. And like as you said, you'd think it's one of those things, isn't it? That's almost so obvious. But when that light bulb moment comes, it's like, right, this is something we need to be focusing on. And explain a little bit about HORIBA Mira's role in that. Then, in terms of the truck Euro NCAP, so we had the launch here, didn't we? Not that long ago.
We did. The launch was one of the main milestones, but we're also involved a lot earlier than this as well. So, as much as if you look at a lot of the types of accidents that we look to avoid within the heavy trucks program, there's some that are unique, but in addition there are some really where we try to carry them over. But what really need to look at is when we're carrying over from the passenger car rating, are they still suitable and are they still applicable? So even something really simple, like one of the things that we use in a lot of the testing is a driving robot. So this allows us to be really, really repeatable with where the truck is or the car is relative to whatever moving object that we've got. Actually, if you think about it, trying to get two moving objects to the same place at the same time really accurate is actually really difficult. So this is why we use the driving robots. And because you're dealing now with a much larger vehicle that's got an articulated, pivot point and a significant size trailer out the back of you, the dynamic response of the truck is now really, really different to what it'd be for a passenger car. So we were involved with Euro NCAP probably around 2 years before the launch. And what we did was work really closely with Euro NCAP and the development director there, Matthew Avery. And what we needed to do was basically start with what do we need to achieve? What are the accident challenges that are the problem? And that was all set by Euro NCAP and Matthew with how do we approach, what are the aims of this and the roadmap and what's feasible first? And then what can we carry over and how do we use that to carry it over? And also, do we need to amend anything? And HORIBA MIRA is really central to that. So there was a lot of development work that happened here in collaboration with Euro NCAP and also with truck OEMs. And then also we worked with Euro NCAP to refine some of those protocols to make sure that when they went to the working groups, they were also fit for purpose and that the other laboratories within the rating were also up to speed with what was going on. And basically what Euro NCAP was asking wasn't unfeasible. And then, as you say, the launch, but one of the launch trucks was tested here successfully at HORIBA MIRA as well. So, yeah, a couple of years and lots of iterative cycles just to make sure that everything fit well with commercial vehicles.
Yeah, fantastic. And, again, as you said, that North Star of how do we bring these technologies in, test them, make sure they're functionally robust and ultimately save lives.
Absolutely, yeah. Vision Zero is always at the centre of what we do. And with the we say the word impact, but societal impact. What we want is no impact.
Yes,
reality,
exactly.
Yeah, but one of the interesting things as well is we still with these dummies as well. These are still the consistent tools that are used, whether it's for passenger vehicles, trucks, vans, anything, because they just represent real items.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how Euro NCAP's really leading the way on this on the global stage.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. And Euro NCAP has always been basically trying to incentivize a way for manufacturers to go beyond regulation. And this is exactly true with what's happened with passenger vehicles. And that's no different for commercial vehicles or heavy trucks. So with the implementation now of the truck rating in Euro NCAP, this is the first in the world to do that. And other markets now are already interested in what's going on with Euro NCAP's truck rating for a number of reasons. And this is either that they've got an incentive because they're bringing their own vehicles to the European market and they want to be potentially competitive on that stage and comparable to some of the other vehicles that are already been rated and will be rated in the future. And also from a global NCAP level as well, there's a lot more dissemination previously. So what we've got now is a position where how do we learn from each other? Because every NCAP has got their own particular regional requirements, but actually then the dissemination of what's going on with Euro NCAP in the trucks world is already starting to be looked at by other NCAPs as well. So incredibly influential and really great that we've been involved in making sure that they're a fit for purpose standard, and be really interesting to see how they translate to other regions. For example, if you look at Australasian region, they're unique in that they've got kangaroos, and kangaroos move pretty different to many other objects. So there's always regional differences. So
Yeah, really interesting. As you say, those different, coming back to what we were talking about before, those different considerations in terms of, but actually that having that kind of global partnership and global standard that can be applied in those different areas. So, yeah, very interesting. Sure. Now, I've mentioned your Special Recognition Award. Obviously, presuming that's one of your career highlights. But tell us what about, maybe one or two career highlights. What's been really important to you so far?
I'd have to look back to when we gained Euro NCAP accreditation. So for us, that's a direct link for us to really make a much bigger impact to what our main, vision of, fulfilling work and also making a much more direct societal impact. So for us, when, maybe a family member goes on and looks on the Euro NCAP website about the next vehicle that they might choose, or even just in the marketing brochure, and it's got a number of stars on there, potentially that vehicle has been rated here. And maybe even to be a part of that where we're also helping just the general public that maybe don't have the technical knowledge. They don't need to have the technical knowledge. It's just the basic stars. And to be part of that, and that accreditation unlocks us to be, for the UK, a massive part of that, and also to be working on making sure that UK is represented on what's going on for 2029, which is also kicking off soon in Euro NCAP. So for me, that's absolutely a real significant one that we've been working for 10 years towards, basically. So
yeah, and as you said, it's very, not been involved at all, but it's one of the things I love to talk about because it comes back to that HORIBA MIRA vision of improving lives, making journeys safer, cleaner and smarter. It's the safer bit is so important, isn't it? As you said, for that societal impact. So yeah, I can see, as you say, 10 years worth of work, but to be part of that kind of change and shift and making journeys safer is so important, isn't it?
True, but also if we look at safer and cleaner, and smarter, it's not just the safer. So actually one of the really interesting points is how you use assisted and automated driving for energy efficiency purposes as well. So there's a clean...
I've not thought about that,
there's a comfort and a cleaner element.
Smarter as well,
And smarter. There's a lot. So actually, if there's an ability where you've got an assisted or automated system to allow the driver to no longer necessarily be monitoring what the vehicle is doing because it's under automation, then maybe it's smarter because you've got the ability to do something else with your time.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's bound to be a better driver than I am.
Well, we'll see how we go.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
that's the aim, to be at least safe and competent. But a topic for another day on that one, Sarah.
A topic for another day. Yeah, absolutely. And if you did have a crystal ball, or we had a crystal ball sitting here in front of us, what do you see in the future in terms of technology trends and where things are going?
First of all, what I would see is definitely an impact for what actually Euro NCAP has been aiming to achieve and continues to aim to achieve, is a reduction in fatalities on our road network. So first of all, you could say maybe that's in the crystal ball, but there's a really great advert actually that Volvo just recently released about the best accident is the one that never happens. And I think we could only probably really ever place it in a crystal ball because all we can really look at is trends in statistics to see the change of the societal impact of what's been happening with Euro NCAP and also regulation as well. We've got to look at. So I think first and foremost, that really is core of what Euro NCAP and a lot of what we're doing on a safety level. So for me, right at the centre of that is this, but also what we've got is a massive shift in multimodal mobility and the way that people are getting around today. 10 years ago, if you look at what we've got for e-scooters and electric cycles, we can get, shoes with motors in now and any other creative type of motorized movement that some people are crazy enough to ride, although they look pretty fun but very dangerous. So what's really interesting as well is that even the way that we develop ADAS systems as well, the world around us is still changing. And we also have to react to make sure that we're proactive in not waiting for accident statistics to become before we do something around them as well, in making sure that we can also include these new mobility devices in what we do for basically collision avoidance.
Yeah, absolutely. And also with the advancements in ADAS, actually, we're taking, really big steps, leaps forward into autonomous mobility as well.
Absolutely. There's a really interesting side here where some people see autonomous or highly automated as very, very different to what assisted or ADAS vehicles are. The reality is, in the past 10 years, really the two are becoming very, very close. The step from highly automated to assisted is still very, very large in terms of proving the quality of the system. And again, that's probably another one of our topics, maybe for a future webinar or podcast. But what we really need to kind of look at is there's a lot of learning that we are getting now from the way in which Euro NCAP is changing for 2026 and how that can be applied to highly automated vehicles, because the reality of the validation and verification is incredibly similar. And there's a lot of learning we can carry over. So ensuring that in any decision making that we're tying together how we're making decisions on secondary legislation for highly automated vehicles, we're using the practical implementation of what's already happening with assisted vehicles. Yeah,
absolutely. Definitely building on that track record and those foundations rather than trying to reinvent things again. I think
that's not reinvent that wheel.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really important point.
Sure.
And my last question is really for the next generation. So anyone kind of watching this who thinks, oh, this sounds interesting, and you're clearly really passionate about what you do. What's your advice if someone wants to get into ADAS and system development and ADAS testing? What would you say to them?
So system development is one route. If you want to come and maybe be playing with some of these tools on a daily basis and trying to crash into objects, really, what we need is really, really good practical engineers with good theory as well. And actually skills is a really, really big challenge for us right now in test engineers. A lot of it really, actually, to be honest, what we need is, those great basic skills and some common sense and pragmatism, but a lot of the skills actually, is really to be supported through employment, but really some industrial opportunities before maybe formal employment would be really good. So the opportunity to reach out to be able to see if you can sort of try before you buy and work with us on some work experience placements to get a feel for it. So that's always a great route. So if there's any gap years within your university, that's a massive benefit for people to consider. And when you're then in the wider world, you need to be resilient. And if you fail first time, fail is learning. It's not failure overall. Because like you say, to get my name on that wall has taken 10 years. And like I say, it wasn't always an upward trajectory. So get a goal, stick with it. There will be ups and downs on the way, and just keep going.
That's fantastic advice, and I think a great place to end on. As you say, we've already got 2 spin-off podcasts. We could have talked all afternoon, but I want to say thank you very much, Ashley, for joining me today.
Yeah, it's been a great pleasure. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you.